The year was 1293 BCE, the fourth month of Shemu, the harvest season. Maybe late June or early July in the modern Western calendar. The king of Egypt, Sety I, was traveling. As far as the pharaohs go, Sety was a bit of a nomad. If you chart his monuments on a map, they cover a wide area of Egypt and the surrounding lands. We have papyrus documents from the royal palace that mention Sety traveling up and down the river, especially to the Nile Delta near the Mediterranean coast. We have inscriptions at quarries where Sety went with huge workforces to extract stone. In the eastern hills, there are records of Sety visiting the mining country, leading an expedition to acquire gold. And up and down the river, you can find monuments that testify to Sety's work. Then there is the foreign component. We have the military records at Karnak that describe Sety's campaigns across the Sinai Peninsula into southern Canaan, Lebanon, and north to Syria. Some of these wars are documented by stone stelae erected in the very same lands. The military records also indicate that Sety went west to the edges of the delta and the Libyan desert. Finally, we have records from the south, tales of Sety leading or dispatching a military mission upriver into Sudan to attack rebels, quote-unquote, who defied his authority. And we have a text left by Sety at a curious place that you might call the Holy Mountain. The site of Jebel Barkal is an evocative place, near the fourth cataract of the Nile, the fourth set of river rapids that punctuate the flow. A great outcropping emerges from the desert. It is freestanding, no other mountains connected or nearby. The great cliffs, made of sandstone, rise from the desert landscape and tower over the nearby towns and river. Jebel Barkal is the very definition of a landmark, visible from miles around, an easy reference point for orientation. It also has a distinctive natural feature. On the northeastern tip of the mountain, a rock promontory emerges. It seems to have separated from the mountain a long time ago, and by the New Kingdom, when the pharaohs reached this area, erosion had given the promontory a particular look. From certain angles, the outcropping resembles an enormous serpent rising up from the ground with a crown atop its head. That symbol was powerful, the cobra with royal insignia, which is known today as the uraeus. It adorns the brows and crowns of rulers on their statues, their wall carvings, and their funerary items. From the beginning of their visits in the 18th dynasty, Egyptian monarchs viewed the Jebel Barkal as a special place. They called it the Jo-Wab, or Pure Mountain, and they even depicted it in art with that great serpent emerging from its front. You can find an image of the Jebel with the cobra in the great temple at Abu Simbel, constructed by Sety's heir, Ramesses II. And in his own time, Sety made contributions to this sacred place. In the 11th year of his reign, Sety came to the Pure Mountain. Perhaps he was in the region already, on some military or administrative endeavor, or perhaps it was a special visit to honor the gods of the Jebel. The great mountain had become a sacred place, particularly to Amun-Ra, who was thought to dwell within the sandstone rocks. We hear of Sety's visit and his offerings to this god on a stela, a stone slab decorated with hieroglyphs and art. The stela is now in Khartoum in the Archaeological Museum. It shows Sety making offerings to Amun-Ra and to Mut, the mother. As the king burns incense and presents the offerings, the gods grant him life, like Ra, forever and ever. And Sety declares his piety for the divine mother and father. He says, quote, "Behold, his person, Sety, was in the city, either Waset or Men-Nefer, doing that which pleased his father Amun-Ra, and also Ptah the Great south of his wall, and Atum, the lord of the two lands, he of Iunu, or Heliopolis, and that which is pleasing to all the gods and goddesses of the Riverland, because they grant his bravery and victory in all lands. Sety made this temple as his monument for his father Amun-Ra. He made the temple anew with an open court of appearances. It is made of fine white sandstone, an excellent work for eternity. Sety did this because he is beneficent to his father. He is a master of laws who makes decrees and who vanquishes the rebel who violates his territory. Sety is a lion against Syria and a bull against Cush. People say to him, "You are the true son of the one who fashioned himself," that is, the creator god, Atum-Ra. "You, Sety, shall be a king, bountiful in recruits and soldiers." Amun-Ra has assigned to Sety every land together, and the king's borders are set everywhere that Ra shines. Let your hearts be joyful, O lords, who preside over the thrones of the two lands. For the son of Ra, Sety, has built your temple anew, of fine quality, hard white sandstone. He has doubled your offerings. He has given you more than anything done before. May you, gods, grant him all life from you, all health from you, like Ra forever. End quote. In the 11th year of his reign, around July, Sety honored his divine parents. He made offerings to Amun-Ra, Mut, and many others besides, at the Pure Mountain, which we know as Jebel Barkal. And the king decreed that these gods should receive a beautiful new home and more offerings than ever before. In return, they should give to him life, Ankh, and health, Seneb, forever and evermore. Alas, this particular prayer went unanswered. Sety did not receive health and life forever. In fact, less than a year later, the king of Egypt was dead. Sety I died in the 3rd month of Shemu, the harvest season, roughly June in the modern calendar. He had reigned for 11 full years, dying early in his 12th. Remarkably, the king passed to the west just a few days after the anniversary of his accession. Comparing various texts, scholars date Sety's reign to the 3rd month of Shemu, day 24, or thereabouts. But Sety's son and heir, Ramesses II, marked his own accession on the 3rd month of Shemu, day 27, and he did that quite publicly in a way that has left many records. Working backwards, it seems that Sety I took power on the 3rd month of Shemu, day 24. 11 years later, he marked the anniversary of that occasion, and then, just a couple days later, he died. I should note that the length of Sety's reign is a matter of debate. In earlier days, scholars credited him with a much longer reign, perhaps 15 or even 20 years. That was partly based on his monuments, so numerous and so splendid. It seemed unlikely a king could build such wonders in a short reign. More recently, the pendulum has swung back a bit, giving Sety 10 years of rule, approximately. The highest indisputable date is year 9, with records from Aswan and Cannaeus. There is also the Jebel Barkal stela that seems to say 11 years, although scholars like Jacobus van Dyck have disputed that one. At the moment, 10 years, plus or minus, seems safe on the current evidence. With that in mind, I have stuck with 11 years, roughly in the middle of the various interpretations. As always, that is just a guideline. Dates are subject to change with new discoveries and scholarship, so don't treat my word as gospel. If you would like to know more, see the references for this episode. Anyway, At the time of his death, Sety was approximately 45 years old. We know that because his mummy has survived. It was discovered in the late 1800s, buried in one of the royal caches. The king lay in a wooden coffin, not his original one, and it was labelled in triplicate, with texts from the priests who had inspected his tomb, removed his mummy, and reburied him in secret. From those texts and the mummy's physical features, like comparing Sety to his father, his son, and descendants, the identification of the body is pretty secure. Assuming that's accurate, we have a strong basis for studying the man himself. Sety's body is excellently preserved. Not only was it well protected in antiquity, but the mummy itself is a magnificent example of the embalmer's craft. What I mean is, the priests and physicians undertaking Sety's mummification did a splendid job. Thanks to their work, we can tell a lot about Sety's physical appearance and his health in the last years of his life. Sety was approximately 167 centimeters tall, about 5 foot 5 inches. His body has shrunk a bit in death, but most forensic studies put him in that height range. Not a massive chap by modern standards, but a decent height for the time. Sety appears to have been quite robust. His shoulders are broad, his arms crossed over the chest. He has a slightly oval face with prominent eyebrows, a sloping forehead, and a narrow but hooked nose. His jaw is wide, his chin strong. The king is bald, no hair survives on his scalp, but it's unclear if Sety had lost his hair or whether he shaved it, or perhaps the embalmers did so after his death. Either way, he presents a strong and remarkably lifelike appearance even today. By the time he died, Sety was showing some signs of aging. Forensic studies, especially with X-rays and CT scans, have revealed some mild degeneration in his spine. There is also a bit of wear and tear on the teeth, and his knees have the early signs of osteoarthritis. But that's about it. The king was in decent health at the time of his death. Which begs the question, what actually killed him? That is tricky. Multiple studies from the late 1800s to the early 21st century have examined this particular body. Surprisingly, in all of that work, no study has ever identified a reliable cause of death. There are no obvious wounds or injuries, except for damage done to the body after its burial. There is no clear sign of illness or something traumatic, and the king did not suffer any obvious diseases in his teeth or gums. No matter where you look, the king seems fine. For all the world, it looks as though Sety just went to sleep and never woke up. One possible answer is some kind of heart disease or heart failure. You see, studies of the mummy have revealed something interesting. His heart is missing. On the left side of the chest, where the heart should be, there is a mass of linen soaked with resin. On the other side of his chest, the right, there is a lump of stuff, roughly the shape of a human heart. The first examiner, Elliot Smith, was not sure if this was the actual heart placed on the wrong side of the body, or simply packing material for the chest. But Smith could not determine its nature without cutting a piece of this mass and using a microscope. He didn't want to do that, so the identification of the lump had to await more precise and less destructive technologies. In the early 2000s, we got some results. CT scans of Sety's body identified this lump in the right of the chest as something else entirely. It seems to be an amulet wrapped in linen and placed within the chest cavity. The amulet is heart-shaped, like an actual heart, not a cartoon one, and bound up with packing. If that is accurate, then the heart itself seems to be missing. It has been substituted with a symbol. It's not clear why. Perhaps the amulet is meant to replace a defective heart, say if Sety suffered from a congenital disease or died of a heart attack. Or perhaps there was a mistake in the embalming, and the priests had to substitute it. This one is a bit of a conundrum. Until we can determine the king's cause of death with greater certainty, the missing heart is unable to tell its tales. One point in favor of the heart attack idea is the presence of another amulet. It is a wedjat, that is, the eye of Horus, used for protection, and it's wrapped up against Seti's left arm, just behind the elbow. That might be significant. The human nervous system connects at the spine, and the nerves of your heart and your left arm often meet in the same general area. When a person experiences pain related to a heart attack, the brain can misinterpret that pain as coming from the arm. So, if you'll allow me to speculate terribly, maybe Seti was suffering a heart issue and experiencing pain in his left arm. As the affliction worsened, the king may have cradled or massaged that limb, trying to relieve the ache. The physicians and priests observing him might have placed a wedjat, eye of Horus, against that arm to protect the limb and drive away malicious forces. Then there is a third amulet, outside the body, against the king's lower back. Apparently, heart pain can spread to that region, so this might be another protective device. To be clear, all of that is hypothetical. Without microscopic analysis of the king's tissues, his cause of death remains speculative. But what we know is, Seti's body has no heart, just an amulet. There is another amulet on his left arm, and a third on his lower back. If those placements are significant and not just coincidence, perhaps a heart disease or heart attack was the cause of death. It is noteworthy that Seti seems to be in good health, all things considered, and his death in his mid-40s or so is a little bit younger than we might expect if everything were ship-shape. After all, Seti's descendants, like Ramesses II and Merneptah, both lived to ripe old ages, and Seti's father, Ramesses I, probably did as well. If that is accurate, why did Seti fall in the prime of his life? Alas, current evidence leaves a gap. We must wait for more information. Whatever the cause of death, Seti went to his afterlife in reasonably good preparation. The king's body is excellently preserved, apart from that heart thing, and the embalmers were able to maintain his facial features to an extraordinary degree. Seti's eyes are closed, but the eye sockets are delicately packed with linen, just enough to give them a lifelike shape, but not enough to distort them. The same is true for his cheeks, which have linen and resin packed under the skin, keeping the face stable. The embalmers did an excellent job. Among countless mummies recovered from Egypt, Seti is one of the most lifelike. Leaving aside the desiccation, he truly looks like he is merely sleeping. Of course, I should note, if Seti did not suffer any obvious natural cause of death, what about something unnatural? Could he have been poisoned or suffocated by enemies unknown? Well, yeah, that is a question. And despite my best efforts on Google, and probably raising all kinds of alarms with my search history, I can't find any obvious way of telling if a mummified, ancient body would show signs of asphyxiation or poison. For example, if someone held a pillow over Seti's face, suffocating him, that should cause hemorrhages in the blood vessels of his eyes. But the act of embalming, drying out the body, absorbs all of the moisture and dries out those same vessels. As for poison, well, that would depend on the material used and its effects. It might not even be a malicious poison. Say, what about a snake bite? A snake's venom could have done for Seti, and the embalming process may have simply obscured signs of the bite or infection. All of that is speculation. I'm not a medical professional or anything even close to that. I assume that the forensic studies, from Elliot Smith to Sahar Salim and everyone in between, have checked for those kinds of details. But to date, no one has reported anything, even tentative, about Seti's cause of death, and I don't want to sully the name of any ancient courtier, or servant, or family member, or animal. As far as the evidence allows, Seti died naturally in his mid-40s. That is the best we can say for now. That is the story I'm going to tell. We don't know how Seti died. What about the location? Well, anywhere is possible, but there are a few likely candidates. Seti had at least 3 residences along the Nile Valley. There was one in the south at Waset, modern Luxor, one in the north at Men-Nefer, or Memphis, and then one in the far north at a town called Hutwaret, or Avaris. Each of these locations has evidence for Seti living, or at least building a palace, at some point in his reign. Any one of them could have been his home at the time of his death. Speaking of timing, that might be a clue. Seti seems to have died in the 3rd month of Shemu, which is roughly June. With that in mind, we might speculate that the king was in the south. You see, about a month before his death, the southern city of Waset celebrated a festival, an annual party associated with the West and the deceased ancestors. It is called the Beautiful Festival of the Valley, or Cheb Nefer en Ta Inet. In this event, the people of Waset, and maybe other towns, would cross the river Nile to visit the graves of their ancestors. The gods did the same. Amun-Ra, Mut, and Khonsu would come forth from their sanctuaries at Karnak. They boarded ships and sailed to the West Bank to visit the temples of rulers past. Seti definitely took a special interest in the beautiful festival of the valley. The king's mortuary temple, or memorial temple if you prefer, was specifically designed to host this festival when the gods came forth. The king's temple is located in Waset, modern Luxor. It is west of the Nile, but it was connected to the river by a canal and a harbour. And according to the art and texts within that temple, the statues of Amun-Ra, Mut, and Khonsu were supposed to visit this monument when they made their annual journey. Leaving Karnak, the gods would come to Seti's temple first to rest and refresh on their trip. They would receive offerings and fill the house of Seti with their power before carrying on to the other temples of the region. Seti treated the beautiful festival of the valley as an important part of his memorial temple. He built his monument directly across the river from the great temple at Karnak, and texts within his temple specifically describe it as being, quote, Chefet Cher Nebes, that is, opposite to its lord. In other words, Seti built his monument across the river from Karnak, whose god, Amun-Ra, is the lord of this region. So the memorial temple is supposed to connect with the Great Eastern Sanctuary, and Seti tells us that directly. We also know the name of this memorial temple. Seti called it the Hot Ach Men-Ma'at-Ra Em Per Imen Cher Iment Waset. That translates as the temple called Men-Ma'at-Ra, or Seti, is effective in the house of Amun upon the west of Waset. So this monument is part of the larger domain of Amun-Ra. It belongs to that god within his city, and it is connected to his sacred house. Interestingly, the name Seti is effective, Ach Men-Ma'at-Ra, is nearly identical to the name of another temple, the Osirion at Abydos, which Seti called Ach Men-Ma'at-Ra en Usir, or Seti is effective for Osiris. Apparently, the king wanted his funerary complexes, the temples connected with his afterlife, to be effective, or Ach, for the gods of the relevant towns, Amun in Waset, Osiris in Abydos. Seti covered his bases. The king's memorial temple at Waset served a variety of purposes. First and foremost, it nourished the king's soul in life and in death. Offerings brought here would fill Seti's belly and empower him in the afterlife. The temple also acted as a resting house for Amun-Ra and his family, and their supreme power could likewise fill the temple and strengthen Seti in eternity. Finally, the memorial temple had an unusual feature: a second, smaller temple within its walls. On the south side of the monument, just off the main sanctuary, Seti commissioned a chapel dedicated to his father. Ramesses I, the Horus Men-Ma'at-Ra, had only reigned for 1 or 2 years, not enough time to build his own memorial temple. So when Seti commissioned his, he made a space for his father to receive offerings. The result is that Seti's memorial temple is really 3 temples: a house for the king and his eternal soul, a house for the gods, Amun-Ra, Mut, and Khonsu, and a house for his father, Ramesses I. It is quite an efficient piece of architecture. Finally, Seti's memorial temple has a quirk not seen in most monuments. Because of its multifunctional design, with chapels for Seti and Ramesses I, we find the names of both rulers adorning the monument. Then, because the temple was incomplete when Seti died, his own son, Ramesses II, added more decoration and included his name in those scenes. The result is a memorial temple built by one king, but dedicated to 2, and bearing the names of 3 rulers across its facade and walls. An unusual situation, but a good place to practice your hieroglyphs and playing Spot the Cartouche. Seti's memorial temple is one of the overlooked gems of Western Luxor. Most tourists do not go there. Their buses drive past on the way to the Valley of the Kings. But if you are in the region, I highly recommend stopping here. The temple was excavated and then rebuilt by a German team in the 1970s and 80s, and they did a wonderful job. There are palm trees for shade, which give the temple an oasis vibe. They also rebuilt the wall which surrounds the monument, and you can walk on top of that wall, giving you beautiful views of the complex. And best of all, the general lack of tourists means you can enjoy some peace and tranquility far beyond your average monument. The Memorial Temple of Sety I is one of my personal favorites. Do stop by if you get a chance. Sety I died at the start of his 12th regnal year, approximately. His death came in June, the 3rd month of the harvest season, Shemu. Ironically, Sety had just commemorated the anniversary of his own ascent. Now, the king's soul departed his body and flew west. There is a decent chance that Sety died in Waset, or Luxor, having visited the city for the beautiful festival of the valley. Whether or not that's accurate, he certainly came here after his death. The king's body, embalmed and wrapped, would lie in state in his memorial temple until the day of his funeral. That funeral probably happened in late August, assuming a period of 70 days or so for the mummification and preparation. When all of that was done, the funeral could begin. Seti's last rites probably took place in August of 1292 BCE. It was the 1st or 2nd month of Akhet, the flood season. The river was rising. The Opet festival was underway, or just past. But in the west, King Sety was waiting his burial. One day, a crowd gathered at the memorial temple. Courtiers clad in bright white linen, priests wearing a mixture of kilts, robes, and animal skins, and the new king, Ramesses II, garbed in his finery and his crown. Within the temple, the body of Sety I lay in state. It rested within a coffin made of wood and covered with gold and precious stones. The casket rested within a bark, a portable shrine shaped like a boat. It sat upon a sled, ready to be dragged out of the temple and away towards the tomb. Beneath the canopy, the coffin was sealed and shut. Sunlight shining down from windows in the ceiling bathed that casket in bright white light. The coffin must have shone in the daytime gleam. Motes of dust and clouds of incense smoke drifted lazily through the air, carried by the breeze off the Nile. The priests intoned their prayers. Singers raised their voices in melody and chant. Musicians rattled sistra, drawing the attention of the gods. They struck ivory clappers together, in rhythm, underlying the songs. Seti's heir, Ramesses, stepped forward in his crown and regalia, and raised an incense burner. He threw sprinkles of water before the shrine of Seti's coffin. Was Ramesses silent, or did he speak together with the priests? Perhaps he recited passages from the Book of the Dead, the sort of texts which appear on Seti's coffins and funerary equipment. Maybe he recounted chapter 23, which Seti used in his tomb, and which describes the awakening of the dead. Perhaps Ramesses said something like the following, quote, "My mouth is opened by Ptah. The chains on my mouth have been untied by my city. Jehote himself comes, filled and equipped with word power, to untie the chains of Seth that are upon my mouth. Atum gives me my hands that were forced into bindings. My mouth is given to me. My mouth is opened by Ptah. With this, his chisel made of sky metal. It is the one with which he opened the mouth of the gods." End quote. Sandals slapped and scuffed on the stone floors as the procession began. Porters took up ropes and began dragging the bark shrine, carrying Seti's coffin, out of the temple. It passed the threshold, leaving the darkness, and going forth into day. Outside, in the open court, mourners raised their voices in a public display of grief. Drummers beat tattoos, and trumpeters sounded clarions to announce the appearance of the Osiris. Men-Ma'at-Ra, Sety I, was leaving. The procession departed Seti's temple and turned west. They began to walk, slowly, dragging the coffin on its sled up the sloping ground. They were leaving the river land, the world of the living. Ahead, the mountains of Sety I, the west, loomed high. Beyond those peaks, Seti's tomb lay waiting in the Valley of the Kings. The porters hauled the sled, the priests intoned their prayers. The musicians sounded their melodies, the drummers beat their rhythms. Courtiers followed, mourners wailed. Sety was making his last journey. Thank you for listening to the History of Egypt podcast. We have now reached the end of the reign of Sety I, and soon we will begin a new reign with a new pharaoh. I barely even need to introduce this next ruler. Seti's eldest son, his only son as far as the evidence goes, was a boy named Ramessu, or Ramesses II as we know him today. He is, easily, one of Egypt's most famous rulers. We will meet King Ramesses II properly in a couple of episodes, but before we can do that, we must say a proper farewell to Sety. We have covered most of his achievements, but there is one last monument, and I'd be terribly remiss if I didn't explore this one in detail. Beyond his legacy as a ruler, Seti's reign is significant for the tomb in which he was buried. Valley of the Kings Monument number 17, discovered in the early 1800s, is one of the largest, the most complete, and the most finely decorated of all kingly tombs. And the story of its discovery, its design, and what lay within, that is a tale well worth the time. So, on the next narrative episode, we will explore KV-17, the tomb of Seti I. Before I move on, I would like to thank the priests, the top-tier supporters, whose generosity every month goes far beyond any rational reason, and I am truly grateful. My thanks to Linda, Eric, Terry, TJ, Yola, Mycost, Andy and Chelsea, Nidin, Ashley, Veronica, James, Jeffrey, Jean, Karen, Yin, and Dan. And I would like to welcome James and Chris, both of whom joined the Patreon this month. James, Chris, you are most generous, and I am in your debt. May the great lords Amun-Ra, Mut, and Khonsu, who rule the domain of Amun within Waset, bless you and your family. Also, we must say a farewell and a big thank you to Kyla, who has been a priest for a long time, but is currently unable to continue. Kyla, thank you so much for your support. May the gods bless you on your forward journey, and may you continue to enjoy the show. To everyone listening, thank you so much for joining me. Take care. I'll see you soon.